Begin transmission. Hello, everybody. It's Chris and the crew here for Outer Rim Transmission. This is episode 161. We are chatting all about the Acolyte today. We're talking about the penultimate episode, which is called Choice, episode 7. We are getting down to the wire, guys. Just one more episode after this. It's crazy to think. It's come and gone so fast. So we're going to get into that and a little bit more into our weeks in Star Wars this week. So I'll throw it over to Ben, man. How's it going?
Good. Just another week enjoying summertime. Pretty much been chilling the last few days because of an eye scratch. And I'm glad that's feeling better. So it's just been a pretty chill week for the most part. A fun thing I did this week, actually, what sparked my interest to... So I had to reflect on a lot of Star Wars things this week after, what we saw on Tuesday. I actually went through and rewatched the entire season of Boba Fett because I was like, that show, I considered it to be pretty shaky at best. And then when I watch it and you see the cohesiveness of the show and the story and there isn't other than our critiques of say Boba Fett should have been more action packed himself. I could see what they did with the story there. And when I compare it to, when we get into our Acolyte breakdown, when I compare it to decisions they made in creatively in this show, it's man, I'd like to formally apologize to Favreau and Robert Rodriguez because it's wow, it's starkly different now. Literally watching that show off the back of what I saw on Tuesday, that raised my Boba Fett season score from a 7 to an 8, I would say, honestly. It really did, just from, the story and, just seeing what they were trying to get at. So that was kind of my weekend Star Wars was looking back at Star Wars projects I was questioning on. And then I came to the conclusion, I was gosh, I thought I had it bad back then, or I thought I had it questionable back then. And then, I rewatched Boba Fett and I was actually, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is that we end up kind of, I think, lowering our standards a little bit. I hate to say it, but I feel like that's what happened over the years. And you get one thing that's kind of mediocre, another thing that's kind of mediocre, and it ends up just kind of adding up. And here we are several years later, and this is what the standard is, I guess, unfortunately.
Yep. One thing I do have to say, though, about that show, the interesting thing is, I know we had briefly talked about it on Twitter back and forth, you and I, on a potential second season. The interesting thing about it is they do kind of leave the door open at the end of it because, Boba, if they would want to go against some of the criticisms they had from the first season, they easily could because they had, the doors open right there because Boba says to Fennec, hey, we're not cut out for this.
Mm-hmm.
And and then it transitions away. So they could easily get away from that in a second season of the show if they would go that route. So it's nice they kind of left that door open for the potential there. But yeah, that was kind of my week in Star Wars, just reflecting on Boba Fett.
Yeah, I'll take over as well from your point because mine kind of dives into yours. I just got, I'm in a big project right now. If you didn't notice, I was opening card packs last night live on the channel on a stream, so you can go back and watch it after the fact. So yeah, I'm going through organizing those cards I was opening up, and it's a pretty monotonous task, but I'll be honest, it's therapeutic. It's kind of the same feeling with miniatures when I paint miniatures. I kind of just zen out, and it's really relaxing. I'll put on music. Well, in this case, I put on Andor. And I was I watched the latest episode of Acolyte, and then I turned on the first episode of Andor, and it was the biggest whiplash I think I've had since, a roller coaster at Six Flags, because I was oh my gosh, you talk about the stark difference on just the entire setting and everything else, and it's wow. So I give, if you guys are Andor fans, I give you the challenge. If you're okay with the Acolyte, and then you put on Andor, it's going to be quite the experience, quite from one juxtaposition to the extreme there. So,
well, I will add in there, I do think part of the issue with the Acolyte crowd in terms of you and I watching it and several fans alike that watch the multiple mediums of shows, the problem I have with the show is I sit here and watch I'll watch House of the Dragon tonight, which is perfect 10 out of 10 everything. And then 2 days later, it's boom, you like are hitting a brick wall 150
Yeah.
miles an hour. So like, I think that's the problem. Like, we're also having these shows stack up, and it's such a whiplash effect every 48 hours, basically for for us as like a viewer of multimedia.
Yeah, and it definitely, I feel like it has to do with Disney as a brand overall, kind of in this realm. I do, towards the end of the show, hopefully I remember to come back to this because I'll say this for a little later, of like just a broader discussion of like, what is the strategy of Disney with Disney Plus now? Like, are they all in? Are they kind of tapering off and go back to movies? Like, that's something I would like to discuss in a little bit more detail, but that's kind of another thought I had from my week in Star Wars is like, okay, what are they doing here? Are they trying hard anymore? Or are they kind of like, at this point, they're just like, because we don't really know what's coming out after Andor season 2 and Ahsoka season 2. So, yeah, just some food for thought. But how's it going, Milton?
I'm doing well. Been a pretty busy week. I was my girlfriend's family. But other than that, though, man, just same old with living life, working, obviously keeping updated on the Star Wars projects that we discussed on the podcast. But other than that, though, everything's good.
All right. All right. So jumping in, some housekeeping as usual. If you guys are watching live, thank you very much. You can join the chat. And if you're watching live after fact, you could also comment on this video, like the video, everything you do on YouTube, and subscribe for this content. Now, quick update. I will be at San Diego Comic-Con the following week. So we're going to go live a little bit earlier next week. We're going to go live on Friday at the old time of 9 p.m. Eastern. So yeah, we'll go back on the prime time on the Friday night there. So that's what's going to happen. We'll go back to our normal time. So yeah, summer's a little wonky. We all have very crazy schedules, fluctuating family and parties, everything else going on. So yeah, join us next Friday for a breakdown of the final episode of The Acolyte. It's going to be a good time. You can always listen to us anyways on any podcast catcher app of your choice. Spotify, Google Play. No, not Google Play. I'm still so used to saying that. That doesn't exist anymore. Apple Music and Spotify, I think, are like the primary ways people listen. So on anything, nonetheless, just comment if you can. Hit the like button for whatever affirmation approval they have on that website or whatever. And yeah, it's going to be a good time coming up here in the Star Wars land of things. So getting into what came out this week, we have Ahsoka episode 1. Not actually episode 1. I always confuse. If I'm on the other podcast I do with Matthew, Tractor Beam, I'll say this is an episode 1 review. And then if I'm on here, I'll say issue number 1 review. Like, I totally mix up between TV episodes and comic book issues because I'm always talking about them every week. So getting it straight, yes, issue 1 of the Ahsoka adaptation, which is an adaptation of episode 1, is out. So I talked about that as well as High Republic Adventures. So go ahead, check out the video I have for the reviews on that. So yeah, getting into the show proper, there's no news whatsoever that I could find, so we're going to simply do a quick and dirty kind of review of The Acolyte. There you go. Simply put, save it off to suspense. As Ben was alluding to, my initial thoughts are also in line with his. I was not a big fan of this episode, even after watching it again, like literally an hour ago. I feel like we are way too in deep for a flashback that's 90% of the episode. There's just way too much repetition, and I'm left with unsatisfied. I'm dissatisfied after that episode. It just ends, and it's like, that's it. There needs to be more resolution. I want to understand what the importance of this entire segment was. It feels like we're just like pulling the car over and just kind of doing something else at that point, and it just feels just really odd. Yeah, there's good stuff in the episode as we'll get into, but that was my initial reaction for, it's been a looming mystery this entire season. What happened? We're going to get into, was it enough for you guys, this resolution of what happened with Saul, what happened with Torben and all this kind of stuff going on, because there's a lot to discuss there, but initial thoughts were like, wow, I have to wait another week now. That felt like it didn't like satisfy any appetite I had with this show. And it was a shame because the last 2 episodes, I was like, okay, this show turns around now and it's actually going to end up being good. Whereas now we're back to where we started, where it's like, I'm kind of like all over the place with it. But I want to throw it over to Milton. What was your initial thoughts on this episode, man?
You guys saw my reply in the group chat. Wasn't a fan of this episode. And before I go on, I apologize. My cat is literally like jumping on the couch, wanting to be in the shot. So if she decides to meow loud and seek attention, it's not my fault.
What's your cat's name, by the way?
Margot. She's actually here right now.
Look at that. We got a pet on the Outer Rim Transmission podcast for the first time, I think.
Yeah, first time.
Yeah, so Margot, this podcast ain't about you. It's Star Wars, honey. Anyways, so I wasn't really feeling this episode like I told you guys in the group chat, because I felt it was so uneven, and I'm not typically the one to put a post to you guys like that to be like, man, I'm going really that hard. But after watching it, I felt confused. Well, not confused, just more just like, did we even get anything? Did we get any resolution? It was like they were telling us something, but they didn't tell us anything. And it was like, okay, but I wasn't a fan of this episode. I felt we lost a lot of momentum with this episode because episode 4 and 5, or I guess episode 5 and 6,
5 and 6,
really did a good job. Really did a good job at playing up what we were trying to get to, and then now it just kind of like fizzled out. I'm thinking, yo, this is your setup episode to your finale. You know, now again, we don't know if we're getting a season 2, but if we're not, episode 7 should set up your finale to a point where it's like, okay, I can't wait. You know, you look at the first, I know, Ben, you're a huge fan of the CW Arrowverse. The first 2 seasons of Arrow and Flash, their episode 21, which was their episode before the finale for 22, was probably some of the best writing because it really bled well into the finale. It built it up as it should. So I felt with this show, and I think a lot of the miniseries we'd be getting, not just with Star Wars, but with also Marvel, they don't do a good job at building their finales where it's like, oh my God, this is must-watch TV, or like, oh man, I wish I had the next episode right now. Because honestly, after watching this week's episode, I was just like, how are they going to make this work if this is truly a one-season, a show? Or are they trying to say, let's set it up for season 2? I don't know. They shouldn't have that thinking. They should say, hey, let's tell the best story we can. And I just felt like this was not a good episode. It was kind of like, it was very unnecessary. And maybe, I don't know. It's for real, I felt this episode was out of place. Let's call it what it is. This could have been set up for maybe episode 2 or 3. Because it felt like we should have gotten this, to set up the story.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of that, let me just jump off that. Monitoring the chat, we have YouTube Royalty in the chat live. We have the race side. Great opinions, as always, from Hannah over there. Does great content. Check her out. She does awesome content, live streams, everything, all the time. Acolyte season, but she has a good head on her shoulders when it comes to the show, because I've been listening to a lot of her opinions on the Star Wars Underworld. She's saying, I firmly believe this should have been the premiere episode of this show. It sets up all the characters perfectly, and then the rest of the season, we see all the consequences from it. Exactly. Why are they making us a flashback? This makes no sense.
Exactly. Here's the thing. This goes back to my original point. I think it was during the premiere, the first 2, and I said, why are they showing all the promotional videos for Carrie-Anne Moss? We only got her for 1 episode out of the first 4, or whatever it was. And it's like, she should have been in the first 3 episodes with these flashbacks to set up the next 5 to conclude it, because she clearly plays a pivotal role in what happened with the witches. I felt like after watching this, I'm thinking, this is what I wanted to see, but early on, because now I understand why Soul is the way he is with May and Osha. I understand this. Was it Tobin? Is that the
Corbin,
the younger Corbin or whatever? And it's like, okay, I understand. And obviously Carrie-Anne Moss character, because we kind of get her cold in episode 1. It's like, okay, I get what her role is and all that. She's the one that decided to have Soul lie, which put a lot of grief and guilt onto him. This should have been told in at least episode 2 at the latest.
Yeah. Ben, what's your thoughts? I want to hear your opening salvo, man.
Yeah, I actually have to take I have to take credit from one of my other friends, Rob Sketchcraft. He does some YouTube stuff, and he's a co-host on Making Star Wars' page sometimes. Anyways, his idea he came up with is something I didn't even consider actually. He thinks the reason why this show hasn't been working so much for so many folks, not because of all the drama and whatever, it's because if you watch this episode, they're trying to make the show feel like it should be about the twins, but they just didn't do a good enough job to really get us to buy into the whole twin storyline. And I never thought of it from that angle, but after he mentioned that, it's I mean, yeah, I see it, just because it's if this episode was the 7th episode, so in Leslie Headland's mind, this was a banger, this was a big, hard-hitting, heartfelt episode, whatever, and it just fell flat. And the problem with it is it opens so many, it didn't really answer a lot of questions, like you mentioned in your opening point, Chris. We've seen 90% of this already, because I honestly thought, guys, I'm not sure about you, but I honestly thought what we were going to get in a second flashback was maybe something 100% different than what we saw, because I thought the first one might have been just a lie, and then it was oh wait, that was actually basically the truth. And now you have this one, it's kind of opening the doors for other questions, they didn't answer how May got saved, they have the whole issue with Soul versus Anastasia, they have there's so many things we can get into with this episode, questions creatively, and then it just leaves you going into the finale thinking okay, well, I mean, we're basically at ground zero again, so let's hope the finale's good, just to land, just to do something.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's so much importance that Leslie Headland and the crew are putting on this moment in time. And it's almost like she's channeling The Last Jedi, the sequence with Luke and Ben. But that works on a completely different level, because it's basically a lie told from different perspectives, where this is just like you said, Ben, it's literally, it's just the same thing, just from a different perspective. So I don't really see what the point of showing it the first time even was. Just show it all together. What was the point?
Or combine the two episodes.
I pretty much referenced The Last Jedi today on the drive home from Jersey when I was talking to my girlfriend about it, because she asked me, she's like, why are people upset about the show? And I tried to explain it to her, and I was like, it's kind of had that Last Jedi feel at times, and then it's people were so divisive about that movie, as they should have been. But here's the thing. What really irks me about this episode is that I've been defending this show the last 2 weeks, actually.
Yeah.
Defending it. And rightly so, because those episodes were pretty solid.
Yeah.
I think anyone listening to our podcast, I mean, even Hannah herself can probably say the last 2 episodes were actually some of the best writing of this show. And it made sense. We're okay, we feel like we're getting on track. We finally got a good footing. And then this happens, and it's damn, what? Why? Why ruin this? A different episode could have been placed here to set up what should be an epic finale, we would hope. And it's okay, I have no idea what's going to happen. And honestly, do I even care at this point? I don't know, which I shouldn't be asking that to myself.
Yeah.
Well, Milton, let me ask you this, since you're on the whole point of the placement of the episode. Instead of this, I saw someone float this out on social media, or even to you, Chris. What do you think? Instead of doing a flashback that we've seen already, why not do a flashback at Chimere's past to lead into the finale? That would give us the bad guy's perspective then.
That honest to God, that would have been actually the better option, just because the last 2 episodes were mainly about him and his perspective and with the Sith. So this should have been the episode of, you're right, of Chimere and what he went through, because he referenced his master and what that went through. So it would have been, okay, this makes sense. And then it could have let's say the last 15 minutes of the episode would have been current times and how that meshed together, which leads into the finale. It would have worked. Obviously, it depends on the writing, but I don't know. This probably could have been about the Sith at this point.
Here's the thing.
It's all about the Acolyte.
Yeah. Here's the thing. This episode would have worked better if they used the framing device centered around Soul and having that conversation with May. What was like the point of just setting that up and not even showing anything? If they showed at least a little bit of like cuts here and there back to the present time, that could have saved this episode. There could have been that through line of, oh yeah, he's telling a story, but then we're getting to learn more about these characters in the present time, how they're feeling, how her reaction to learning this news is. Now instead, we're going to have to deal with all that again in under 40 minutes on top of everything else. When they could have put it in with this episode, taking out again, I'm armchair quarterbacking the heck out of this thing right now, but it makes you wonder the quality, I hate to say it, the quality control that's happening at Lucasfilm right now. How could they watch this and not like send notes back to Leslie and say, hey, maybe you should like put this somewhere else? That's what worries me about Lucasfilm now, is like, this is their marquee thing that's happening and you're letting it slip now. And it just, I'm a bit disappointed, to say the least.
Yeah, I'm dumbfounded. Like, I really don't know. Because again, and as you know, we don't like being negative on this podcast, especially like unnecessarily. And let's be clear, unnecessary negativity. If something's bad, we will acknowledge it. This wasn't good. And I agree with Chris on this. I think who is running the ship there in the sense of, okay, how can we tell the best story possible, whether it's a movie, miniseries, or multiple seasons? Who's in control of really navigating that through line of narrative storytelling? You know, it can at some point, again, look at the first 10 years of Marvel. That was the Kevin Feige role. I mean, he's still there, but that was, clear as crystal. He knew exactly where he wanted to go from point A to point Z, in that first 10 years. Ever since, I don't know, I guess since The Last Jedi, I don't know what the hell's been going on, because consistently, like in these miniseries, and we'll focus on that for now, it's just a lack of consistency. The only one that's been solid has been Mandalorian.
Yep.
Probably Mandalorian and Ahsoka, maybe. That's it.
Yeah.
And then obviously Andor. But that's it.
Yeah. So go ahead, Ben.
Oh, go on.
I was gonna sort of semi-change the conversation back to like let's dive in a little deeper on the episode itself. So the big mystery of what happened that night, like when it comes to the Maze storyline with the fire, when it comes to Coral, when it comes to Anastasia, were you guys satisfied by all this secrecy that we've been leaning towards this entire season with what actually went down? Do you think it was serviceable? Do you think you hoped it would be better? Like, where'd you come in on this, Ben?
You going first, Ben?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go.
I think with where I came in on it with, I think like you said, Milton, I was so dumbfounded by this episode. Like after the episode, it took me like a half hour to even respond, like to even post a tweet, because I was so like just stunned, on so many of the decisions. Because for example, for starters, since you mentioned Anastasia last, Chris, so Soul stabbing and killing Anastasia, that's fine in terms of the context of like, okay, she, Soul, that's like Soul's guilt or whatever. But the problem I have with that, just creatively, is like, you literally have her say in her dying breath, I was gonna give you her. Then why do you have Anastasia go all crazy, like demon monster, go hostile, and then Soul's like, what's he gonna do? React? What's he gonna do? Not draw his lightsaber on her? So it was such a poor creative decision. I honestly, when I was watching it, guys, I rewinded it on my Roku because I had to rewatch it because I was like, wait a second, like did I hear her say that correctly? And then I was like, wait, I turned the volume up and she said, wait, I was gonna give you to her. Then why did you go all like demon mode? Like it makes no sense creatively. If anything, what they should do, don't even have her say that line. Just let her go demon mode and let Soul take her out.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I watched it again just fresh now, as I said, and basically what's happening is May runs out and says, help me, and then Soul thinks that she's Osha. He calls her Osha. And then Coral gets all defensive. So I think there's a lot of confusion happening. Like, I think ultimately NSA was trying to like maybe block Coral from killing Soul or something like that. But still, it's like there's a better way of doing that because the Jedi don't know what you're doing and they're going to see that as a threat anyway. So they're defending that. The Soul defended himself and in act accidentally killed her. It's like, well, it's not really his fault completely. So I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Milton. Go ahead.
Oh, it's goofy. Like it's unbalanced. It's the way they put that. I mean, you're right. We'll go back to how the witches portrayed themselves in this whole entire episode. I felt that, yes, they felt like they were being violated. Absolutely, and they were justified to feel the way they did. But you're right. That line where I was going to let her go, because honestly, I felt that even during their arguments among each other, she was going to let her go. She's going to say, "I'm going to let her do this. It's my decision. They're my children." She was very clear to say that. So I felt, okay, they can probably avoid this conflict, take her, and then I was thinking, well, maybe the witches would be the ones to start a problem when they were leaving the planet. But for them to just go in this pivot of, yeah, I'm gonna act a fool, become a demon, and then all of a sudden I'm gonna get stabbed, and then like say I'm gonna give her to you, like come on, that's out of place. And then I'm still trying to understand like the value that they were trying to put in like into Tobin. Like Tobin made no sense except for like
being homesick.
Yeah, like
that's
even
what sparked this.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like they figured out the Vergence, right? They mentioned that Vergence. He's like, oh, this is it. This is how we're gonna do it. I'm gonna go and get them done. Boom. His homesickness is the reason why this conflict occurred. Like to me, that don't make no sense because any Jedi Master would have read that. You're telling me that Trinity couldn't have sensed that he was really going to do something, and also, she allowed that makes no sense.
Even the setup doesn't make any sense,
right? And it's not like the dark side of the Force was clouding their judgment or nothing like that. Clearly, they saw that this kid was emotionally in distress, and she mentioned it in some way, shape, or form after the first encounter. She's like, don't let your emotions dictate whatever she says to him at one point, or says to the Soul. But it's like, she's talking to old boy then earlier too, and it's like, how'd you let this happen?
I found it, yeah.
I don't know. I think my thing, guys, with the whole Torben thing is, like, unless he feels guilt from, like, sparking the whole thing because he's homesick, like, man, I really didn't see a lot of justification for him to go and take himself out in the second episode. I really didn't. Like, I thought he would have maybe been the one. Maybe, I don't know. Like, what if he was the one instead of Soul? What if Torben, being the young, gung ho Padawan to go home, why not have him stab Anastasia just out of anxiety of like, I want to get out of this situation or something, and like maybe spark it that way? Which would have made sense. It's just
which would have made sense for May to be wanting to get him done for sure early on.
Yeah.
But all he did was just have the anxiety, homesick, and it's like, I don't know. And he somehow became a Jedi Master, which after seeing him, that's I'm questioning that.
Yeah, I thought it was funny how the setup with I thought it was cool. They mentioned the Vergence of the Force, and they're going around the planet with their metal detectors and collecting grass or moss and everything else, and then he's asking him like what a Vergence is. It's like, dude, how long have you been on this planet? Like, you're telling me that you went on this mission and nobody told you what you've been doing here for all this time? Like, it was obviously one of those points that was a clumsy bit of exposition on their part. We're like, oh, we gotta explain to the audience what the Vergence is. But like, this Padawan's been doing this stuff for how long? Like, I already see the red flags when they were talking about that.
I think they said what? It was like 6 or 7 weeks. I think they mentioned in the episode they were there.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was 6 or 7. Like, that's
months
or months. It might have been 6 or 7 months. Yeah. It was.
It don't matter. It's just go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's just like, like you said, Chris. Like, even if you're there for a week, you're not going to explain to your Padawan. Are you going to just like leave him out of the details? Like, hey, we're just metal detecting, guys. Like, I don't know. It's odd. I am glad, though, speaking of the Vergence thing, I'm glad you brought that up. Like, because I seen a lot of people like knee jerk online and be like, oh my gosh, are they going at like the Anakin chosen one virgins type deal? But like even Leslie came out and said in the interview after the episode and said, no, like she literally said, no, it's not like the Anakin situation. The virgins is not the twins, it's the location where they're at.
All right.
And I'll give them kudos, and you probably know where I'm going with this, Ben, about the High Republic reference. They're like, oh, this planet was succumbed to the Great Disaster, which was basically like the Nile had started this hyperspace disaster when they blew up this ship in hyperspace, and like all the particles of the freighter went through all different parts of the solar systems and wreaked havoc on planets, causing like cataclysmic things to happen. So that was cool. I was like, all right, there we go. We got another good High Republic reference, and like this Virgins happened. And that's where I was really confused. And I did get a report from Leslie Headland. I forget what website did it. She said, we will know what exactly happened with these twins. Because that was another thing. It's like, oh, we keep going with this. We keep going. And Soul's there, how are they created? And then she never tells him. And she does some kind of like ominous threat, like, oh, the honorable Jedi will meet their end someday or something like that. It's like, all right, just interesting. Like they're twins, but they're genetically the same because they are split up using the Force from one being to split into two. And I don't know.
Well, I've seen a lot of people interpreting though that that line from Anastasia. I think that was from Anastasia, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've seen a lot of people interpreting that as her foreseeing Order 66.
Yeah, I assumed, yeah.
Like, but I don't know, the whole twin thing. I'm so interested because we have probably 40 minutes left of this season. There is a lot to address.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there was a cool element. I mean, like I said, there was cool things about the episode, such as the witchcraft. I thought was kind of neat. Like we got the kind of the other episode, or earlier in this episode even, like the kind of foreshadowing of like, hey, what does this do to a human? And then seeing it on the Wookiee was cool because I was like, yeah, I want to see the Wookiee fight. Like, come on here, you get Eunice Watatomo. You don't want him to just stand around. Like, let's get this guy a lightsaber and see some stuff. So the choreography was pretty good, but I feel like it was a little bit slow. Like, I feel like the Wookiee was just like swinging the saber way too slow for me. I don't know. I just felt a little off. I know they're trying to emulate like the power of the Wookiee, but I just was hoping for something a little faster. I don't know. I'm nitpicking the hell out of this moment. I still love seeing the Wookiee fight, but I just noticed that on my second watch. It's just like, oh, okay. It was short. I wanted to see more. I would have liked to see Indara fighting against him. Like, by the time we see her jumping on him, she's already into his mind, so.
Yeah, I don't know. When it comes to the fighting, I'm used to Disney Star Wars not being good at doing it unless Hayden Christensen or Ewan McGregor are actually on screen. I mean, let's be real here. Like, I'm not. I mean, now, like I said, that the Acolyte Sith fight was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was good.
That. I will give him that. Let's be honest here. But you're right. With the Wookiee fight, it just seemed kind of clunky. But then, as you look back on it, he is 7 foot something, so his movements are going to be smooth. They're going to be longer strikes and strides. Okay. I mean, think of like a boxer who's got a longer reach. It's going to take a little more compared to a quick short guy. So I'm fine with it. It wasn't great, but it is what it is.
Well, the thing with the whole fight with the Wookiee, to play armchair director here for a moment, my mind immediately went to, like you said, it was fine, but my mind immediately went to, wait, you gave us this fight with the witches and the Jedi? I would rather cut this out of this episode and give me the fight versus Chimera instead with the Wookiee, because I was just like, man, we actually see the Wookiee fight and it's not against Chimera. So that's where I was just kind of like, but yeah, I don't know. That whole sequence, it was interesting. And I think the one thing though they could have leaned on more, guys, it was one little line, and I haven't seen a lot of people highlight it yet. The line they mentioned about like sacrifices and stuff. And that witch coven, I wish they would have leaned into it a little more, because the thing is, like, why not why not like tip off the Jedi? Like, oh my gosh, are they like sacrificing kids to like keep their Force essence up or something? Or like, doing like give them more of a reason than what we got, because like, I mean, even the base reason as well. Like, forget Torben for a minute. Look at Soul. Soul knew this girl for 3 days, or however long. Knew Osha, and he gets like obsessed with trying to get her to be his apprentice, when presumably at this time, I'm sure you can atone to this, Chris, like in the High Republic, I'm sure there's like thousands of potential apprentices or something at this time. So it's just like, why are you like choosing this one girl? And like, if you are gonna be so set on this one girl, why not have Soul's back history be something like, him being involved in a cult, like something he can relate to? Like in this one, it's like Soul gets so dead set on her where it's just like, it comes off almost as like, weird.
Yeah, it does come
like,
off that way.
It's just like obsessive versus like, why not like have a situation like where Soul was involved in something, like so he could relate to the kid and be like, no, I got to get this kid out of this bad situation.
Yeah. Jumping off that point, another entry I want to discuss here is just the overall idea of this situation with the Jedi. The Jedi weren't necessarily evil in this point, right? It was just like a series of unfortunate events, from a fire getting started to somebody running out, going screaming bloody murder, and a Jedi defending themselves, and another Jedi brash and going out there to try to get this girl. All this stuff happening, like, the Jedi weren't necessarily portrayed as like bad or evil. It was just like poor decision making. Do you think that was fine? Would you have rather seen the Jedi as evil? I think that's not a good idea. I think no matter what story we're told with Star Wars, they shouldn't really look to be as the bad guys necessarily. But yeah, Milton, what are your thoughts on just like the perception of the Jedi in this moment?
I thought it was a very well... This was probably the best part of the episode to me.
Okay.
It's how they portrayed the Jedi. Because it's showing the cracks in their foundation. And what I'm saying is this. So you look at how Soul, they did the test and blah, blah, blah. I think it was May. She purposely failed it. Okay. And in life, you're allowed to purposely fail something if you choose that you don't want to do it. Okay? Because if someone tried to coach us into taking an exam that we know that if we pass it, we could be taken away from our families, and we're connected with our families, we will try to sabotage it. Right? And we'd have the right to do so. So for him to sit there to say to and it was Indar to say, hey, I want to take a different approach with Osha. Okay, so right there he's already clouded because he's trying to manipulate her. And he really does in a lot of ways when he's like, hey, tell your own truth, say how you feel, that type of thing. He's coaching a child. He's grooming a child to manipulate her feelings. Like, if anyone sees it and says, no, he's not doing that, you're unrealistic, you're being ridiculous, because that's what he did. And she told her truth, and she wants to go, and there's nothing wrong with that, but he coached her and manipulated her. So even Indara calls him out on that, which I think that shows right there, there's cracks in the Jedi's foundation. And honestly, were those kids in any danger from his perspective or his point of view? Yes. But from the audience and from the witch's perspective, even from the children's perspective, they really weren't in danger. He imposed his own will to do that, which again shows cracks in the foundations of the Jedi and their thinking, and that they feel they need to intervene. They didn't really need to intervene. And I think Indar was trying to say, she actually did say it, we're not going to intervene. We shouldn't have to. Like, why? And then boom, this is what happened, tragedy. And it's like, the Jedi are just as Palpatine said it, they're hypocrites. They're dogmatic. They can't get out their own way. So I thought this was the best part of the episode, to show how there's cracks in the foundation and how it was going to later bleed into the other generations of the Jedi moving forward, which is what we got in the movies.
Yes, and then we jump, great points. We jump off to the resolution of all this with Indara being like, no, we're not going to tell the High Council. You just did all this effort to save this girl. You got to at least go through with it. And then we see later on, 16 years later, Soul withholding information from Vernestra Rowe. So, it keeps on going. It keeps on going down the line. You kick the can, keep going down the street. It's just this deceit and these lies. He's trying to say it's like a virtuous thing of like protecting this girl, but as we see, like he's going to be responsible for the damn Sith to come back.
Well, he made it personal, and again, it's all about attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Jedi from day one of the prequel era, we were told attachment's bad, whatever, attachment's bad. They were doing this back 100 years prior, obviously. I mean, he says, I feel like I have a connection with her, and she says, that's your personal. Don't let your personal attachments cloud your judgment, and he did. You know, and even at the end when she was okay, we're going to tell the truth. We're going to say that May started the fire, and she just kept snowballing it, and it's like, my God, like they really aren't helping the situation. They really now are sowing the seeds of tragedy for these two children.
Yeah, Ben, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know, with the Jedi, I'm glad they like kept them, I guess, you know, more like you said, dealing with a series of unfortunate events versus like, I don't know, going pure evil, because the thing is at the end of the day with Star Wars, like you gotta have the Jedi stay at least good, just because, you know, that's what Lucas established, and like, you know, that's what the Jedi should be. Like, we shouldn't be turning the Jedi into like these like terrible people, and then like, you know, then you're gonna have people watching the other movies. You know, that could just cause potential long-term like brand damage, because then it's like, why should I like Rey if she's evil behind the scenes? You know, right. So I'm glad they kept the Jedi like fairly neutral here, or like neutral as much as you can get. But my thing with it, it's like, it's just some of the portrayals of the Force capabilities, even with the Jedi. It's just like, again, it just falls on like creative decisions more than anything with this episode. Like, you know, you have Soul trying to save the girls with the bridge situation.
Yeah, that was
like,
interesting.
It's like, all right, I guess in my head, I guess trying to hold up a like however many hundred, maybe like 1,000-pound bridge or something is a lot harder than holding up 270-pound girls. And it's just like, I don't know. You know, that's your fan logic and stuff, but that's like your real world logic. I guess you know, your mind goes to, let's save the bridge instead of just picking up the two girls and moving them off to the side.
That's stupid.
So I just
listen.
I didn't get it.
Ben, I'm gonna let you finish.
No, you're good. That's all I was gonna say. I just don't get it. Like, and I don't like to be a nitpicker, but that's just like a nit. It's not even a nitpick. It's like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Wait, it happens.
Here's the thing. In episode, I think it was 1 or 2, he caught Osha when she was falling off the edge. Mm-hmm. Remember?
Yeah.
So it's like, bro, don't tell me you're not powerful enough to grab two 70-pound girls, force hold them, and just pull them over. You know, like I know it's dramatic effect. You want to show the bridges, all that crap. I was like, come on, my man. Like, there's no need for that. Like, that was horrific. Because I thought to myself, we've seen multiple Jedi pull people out of the sky.
Yep.
It's not unusual powers.
Well, here's something, Milton. Why not, if you're gonna do that and have that whole sequence play out, why not just have like a stray witch coming at him, ready to like attack him? So, you know, his concentration's like,
that makes sense. Yes, I agree. Like, that would be logical if he's initially pulling the bridges with someone coming in, which would distract him. I'd be okay. Logically, makes sense. I can see why he would make that mistake of not being able to control those bridges.
Yeah, good point. Speaking of witches, I do want to dive into the detail of Indara going into the mind of Kelnaka, and I'm floating around the idea of this crazy theory of her like getting inside their minds and killing them. Do you think like she had any influence on like physically, like mentally, like purposely shutting down the minds of the witches and killing them, or is this just like a byfactor of like all their energy, no matter what, is going into this, kind of like Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi, how he like channels all of himself and he dies? I don't know, I have that crazy theory where it's like, maybe there's a little darkness in Indara and she purposely did like a feedback loop to just kill them all, because I thought that was kind of crazy. Like, I guess they did something about sacrifice, like these people are gonna sacrifice, but you also seen in a scene before that they were kind of against certain ideas of NSA in the first place. So it's like, would they commit themselves to die like that if they're already against her? And they're like, I don't know. This is a very murky thing. I was hoping we get a little bit more concrete information about that, but I was very just like, analogous or whatever.
I think actually, guys, like, we know Leslie took inspiration from Phantom Menace and like the prequels and stuff. I bet you she just took inspiration from the droid control ship thing. Like, hey, what if this witch tribe does like a force connection like the droids, and then you cut off the hub of it and it takes them out. Like maybe she took inspiration from that, because like she's talked about the Phantom Menace so many times. So like maybe that's kind of like her droid Trade Federation moment, I guess. I don't know.
It's yeah.
Well, I think it is about time to just give our thoughts and scores out of 10. I'll throw it to Middleton for this one. This is the end of tonight's discussion, but we're going to be talking about this a lot more in the future episodes, so you don't have to worry about that. There's a lot more of this coming around. But yeah, for tonight, we're going to have to start wrapping things up. So yeah, just let us know what your score was, what your final thoughts were, all that good stuff, man.
Yeah, so this episode was not good. I honestly, it might be the weakest of the series thus far. I had no connection to this episode. I felt it was out of place. It was disjointed, probably the best word to use. I felt the pacing throughout the episode. The pacing issues continue for me. I just don't know what it is about this show when it comes to pacing. I felt, and I agree with Hannah. This should have been maybe a premiere episode, or at least episode 2. I mean, yeah, this could have been part 2, episode 1, honestly. So, this is I'll give it a 4.5.
A 4.5.
I gotta get 4.5. It just didn't do it for me. It didn't set up the way I thought it was set up for a finale. Because I was actually looking forward to this episode. I look forward to this thinking, oh man, we got 2 really solid episodes. How are they going to set up a good finale at this point, knowing we had a solid through line at the point that we were thinking?
Yeah.
Just didn't deliver.
Yeah, Ben, as you put it, this is not how you do a penultimate episode, because you're supposed to be hyped. You're supposed to be hyped going into the finale. I think most of the people out there that have watched this from the small sample size I've gotten are left with the ultimate question you don't want to have your audience of having, which is, how are they going to land the plane? How are they possibly going to? That's not the kind of vibes that you want your flagship series that you've been promoting for 4 years to have going into the finale. That's not the kind of level of hype. So yeah, what's your score and thoughts out of? There you go, Ben.
Yeah,
thoughts out of 10. No, I'm not going to give you your thoughts out of 10. Score out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, like we mentioned, there's like plenty of things wrong with the episode. Unfortunately, like Milton always says, like, we don't try to come on here to be negative, but like the stuff that's negative, we will point out, and pretty much the majority of this episode is negative. And even we haven't even mentioned one thing that was talked about in the fandom, and I jokingly tagged Milton and said, hey, the post-credit song, we have like a pop song at the end of it. Instead of getting like these like lower artists, like get the people that have been involved in big movies. Like Eminem's done the Venom soundtrack, so like bring him. If we're gonna do pop in Star Wars, like bring in some big artists. Bring Eminem, Kendrick, like bring in any of these people. Like let them drop a Star Wars track at this point. Like I thought that pop song was so jarring at the end of it, like versus just like a basic like instrumental. But yeah, I mean, that combined with everything else we've discussed, and the fact that it just kind of like reset us. To me, it reset the season, the episode before the finale, and like that is a very, very like bad way to do things, because like you mentioned, Chris, you're going into it where it's like, people are like, okay, like how are we gonna land this? We have probably 40 minutes of screen time left of this show, like I don't know. I would be happily surprised if they somehow land it. But for me, like it calls me to go and review a lot of my opinions on like live action Star Wars under Disney so far. And to me, honestly, like I glanced through the episode guides for all the shows like Mando, Boba Fett I watched, Kenobi, Andor, all of these things, Ahsoka. And like, to me, honestly, this is probably, in my book, the worst piece of live action Star Wars we've gotten under Disney. And like, I don't like to, go to that like extreme, because it's not even me being hyperbolic. Like, I just think it is, because like, like I said, I went through even the worst episodes of Mando, still beat this out. And like, to me, with all that in mind, I have to give this a 1 out of 10. Like, this is going to be my lowest score I've ever given anything on this podcast, and to me, it's just completely unwatchable. Like, I just, if the problem with this episode, for example, the reason I give it a 1 is like, if you go and blindly like show this to someone who's even just like a casual Star Wars fan thinking of watching this show, they probably don't watch this show. And it's just like, I don't know, it isn't a good way to head into the finale. I have hopes though, like hopefully we get some of the things we speculated about before for the finale. Hopefully some of those things pay off. But yeah, going into the finale, I mean, I'm pretty much reset on the season. Like, we're back to square one.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to be the highest score out of all of us. I'm going to give it slightly higher than Milton, a 5 out of 5, which is still technically on the American grading scale an F. There was not enough to redeem it. I mean, but there are some cool things that I mentioned. I like the lore of the witches and how we see somebody getting possessed. I mean, I don't think it's the first time we've seen somebody getting possessed, but also answering some cool things like, hey, what does a Wookiee look like when they're using a lightsaber? Milton was able to help me out with the conversation today of like, yeah, it makes a good point. He's a lot larger. Things take a lot longer. When you have long limbs like that, that actually makes a lot more sense. So yeah, that's why we do this conversation here, because it helps us understand the episode as we're talking about it sometimes. So that's good. The whole idea of the Jedi, I like how they handled the Jedi. They're not evil. There's just a bunch of bad events. They're flawed. That's what it comes down to, flawed. But when it comes down, and even the hyperspace disaster stuff, like, cool, we got a High Republic reference that is pretty big and important, and stuff about the Virgins of the Force, bringing that up again, really good stuff in general. But execution really is everything, and when you don't have something that is well planned to really get us peaked for the next episode, then it kind of failed in its job. As a penultimate episode, it definitely failed in its job of getting us excited, getting us to instead question, how is the show going to end? Is not how. And sometimes you do that with other shows, like in a good way, where it's like, oh my gosh, that 9th episode was so good, in Game of Thrones. How are we going to go and do this with episode 10? It's more like, oh my gosh, like, it's a crisis in this show's case, where it's like, if they don't pull this off, what is the ramifications of this show on the Star Wars timeline in general? Like, what was the point of this show? And that's really just the crisis point. If we're asking, like, why did they do the show in general, then that's a big issue. So that's about it. We'll see you guys here in 5 days' time. Basically, like I said, we're going to be doing this show this upcoming Friday, since I will be out for Comic-Con the following week. So yeah, there you go. Join it. Put us in your calendars. Put a notification there. Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get a throw over to you, Milton. Where can the people follow you and your journeys and your adventures on the internet? If you would like them to follow you, I should say.
Yeah, that's fine. So you can find me on X at MiltonWeber7 or Instagram at Milton7Weber. I usually post funny stuff, workout videos, some family stuff here or there on my social media posts. This week, like I said, we have 2 finales this week. One with The Boys.
Oh yeah,
I love that show.
Love it.
We have obviously the finale for The Acolyte. I may not be on the podcast on Friday because of timing, but I'll talk about that with the team. If I do make it, that'd be a great conversation. If not, I know it will be a great conversation. So come out, enjoy the show like we always do. But on a serious note, before I let you guys, close out, I know we had that. I don't like getting political on the show, but we had that assassination attempt yesterday with former President Trump. Look, there's no need for violence in the political game. We all bleed, we all breathe, we all have difference of opinions, we all agree sometimes. It is what it is, but there's no need for that. Obviously, prayers go out to former President Trump. The gentleman that actually stood in the way that got killed to save his family, and any people else that got hurt there. Prayer goes out to their families. Hopefully everyone's okay. and can and mourn their tragedy and move on and be healthy and safe moving forward. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all live under one banner. So let's try to cut out the violence. Let's just do better.
Yeah, I can.
Go ahead.
I can echo all those sentiments as well, Milton. Just because, like you said, there's no need for that. There's no need for that. There really isn't. But yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to find me talking on the internet as well, you can find me chatting on Twitter at RealBenMaynard or Instagram at RealBenMaynard.
There you go. Yeah, complete shocker when I seen the videos and all. I was like, whoa, this is happening. So yeah, just violence, no violence, no violence. Let's be civil. Let's be civil. And yeah, once again, you can find me on Twitter at Starrapter. Oh, real quick. I was a guest on the Delayed Replay podcast with my friend Steven Shinder. I've been on there many times. We give kind of like an improv version of what a movie would be in our head. We kind of like headcanon a movie before it's even out. So we were talking about Captain America Brave New World, we were talking about Thunder, what is it called? The Thunder people of Marvel. Thunderbolts? Thunderbolts, yep. Yeah, so we were giving our like improv as if that movie happened and we've seen it. It's a really funny idea. So I think we came up with a pretty crappy version of that movie. Like, I did not give it a good score. So if you're looking for more negativity, I guess, go ahead and find Delayed Replay, because I tore that movie a new one. Hopefully it's nowhere near as bad as what I spun the story out to be. But speaking of which, no, there was that trailer for the new Captain America movie, as I already mismentioned the title of that. But yeah, that trailer looks good. But we got some Star Wars loom now. We got Harrison Ford and Giancarlo Esposito at SI. I'm looking forward to that. But for that is basically it for our Star Wars talk this week. For Milton, for Ben, for Chris, aka Starrapter, that's going to do it for 161 of Outer Rim Transmission. We'll see you here Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Have a good one. May the Force be with you always. And transmission.